obviously to develop trance, you've got to meditate. So that helps us in our own life, becoming mindful, being able to get to that deep meditation. Sitting in a trance circle, the philosophy of the spirit world is mind-blowing.
Welcome to the Spirits Beside Us podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott. I'm an ex-Wall Street analyst turned international medium, spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. Each week we'll dive into the fascinating and uplifting arena of the non-physical world to help you deepen your understanding and spiritual connection to the unseen realm. We'll also share a behind-the-scenes look with others who've done the same and speak with experts in the field about their experiences. Pull up a seat and let's dive into these perspective-changing conversations. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Spirits Beside Us. I am so excited today to have one of my good friends and wonderful mediums with us today, VanZyl. She is a former lawyer turned evidential medium and healer. And talk about a 180. She's formerly from South Africa, but now she's living pretty close to me in Clifton, New Jersey, here in the States. She's the owner of Montclair Psychic School, also a wellness center, and also that's where she has her office that she conducts all of her private sessions. And for the last 18 years, she's really been focused on training evidential mediums, trance mediums, and Usui Reiki practitioners. So she's really been quite instrumental in teaching many of the mediums and practitioners that are out there. Now, obviously, she's got a lot of different modalities under her belt, but she really loves and carries a passion for working with spirit. That's really sort of her main focus. And her school's turned out a lot of evidential mediums that are, world renowned. I was in her school. I'm not going to say I'm world renowned, but I went through her school for a number of years. And she was incredibly influential with my path. So I thank her from the bottom of my heart. She's been internationally trained. She's also trained in the U.S., also in the U.K. at Arthur Findlay College, also in Australia and New Zealand. So she's been around the block. She's been trained. She's wonderful. So I'm so happy to have her. So welcome, Lee, and so glad to have you.
Thank you, Chris. Wonderful to be with you. It's exciting.
Oh, yes. So one of the things that has always boggled my mind, I think I understand it because I come from a similar materialist, logical, analytical background, but you're a former lawyer. How did you go from being this evidential lawyer, somebody who was based in fact and everything had to be proven, to becoming a medium where you can't really do that?
I think sometimes a lot of things just happen by design. While I was working as a lawyer, never had that moment where I wonder what it's like to be a psychic. I wonder what it's like to be a medium. I actually found my mediumship through my daughter, who was a natural medium and was hearing dead people speak to her. From age 2, she would speak to them. And I personally found that a little bit of a horrifying prospect. And just before going to school, as with a lot of the sensitive children, they're a bit odd, right? So the kids didn't really gel with her. So I found her a place here in New Jersey where they worked with children, similar kinds of kids. And it was there waiting for her one day that I randomly saw a mediumship class, which led me to meet my first teacher, who was also from Australia. And I developed my mediumship, and I just was so surprised by the fact that I could connect because I didn't think of spirit in that way. So it was, wow, I can't believe someone's accepting something that I gave them. But some bug bit me. But I must say my journey is probably 100% due to my teacher, who soon after the class kind of worked her magic from Australia and got me leading a circle, teaching. She really promoted me from across the ocean. And I think she might have seen something inside me that I didn't quite know was there. But I'm happy in retrospect that for the first time in my life, I paid attention to my intuition and thought, just do what this lady's saying. And that led to the unfoldment of my mediumship. So it was by chance, right? But if you mention lawyers are all about evidence. So I think one of the things that really resonates with me is the fact that you have to provide evidence.
Mm-hmm.
I think that gives a medium credibility. It separates the mind from the imagination. So I think in many ways, that's why mediumship specifically resonates with me, because it's evidentiary based, so it's not like you're giving people a story and they might know it's true or they don't know. They can take it or not. So you've got to prove yourself. So I think that's good.
Yeah, I can definitely see that link between. As soon as I was saying it, I began to realize, wait a second, why am I asking the question? Because obviously, you're an evidential lawyer, you're an evidential medium. The two, there's a bridge right there.
There you go.
And I was like, wait a second, that's not the right question. And if I remember right, there is a famous lawyer whose name I can't remember right now, who wrote a book talking about that there's so much evidence out there just about the spirit world that if you were to pile all the evidence one piece on top of the other, all that evidence would go miles into the sky.
I can imagine.
It's amazing. Victor Zamet, that was his name. Victor
Oh
Zamet.
yeah, I remember reading a book of his long ago.
Yeah. So I remember thinking, wait a second, you're a lawyer. Why would you know that? But apparently he's got that connection. So you're a little bit different than some people, because some people say, oh yeah, well I knew it when I was young. I had a young connection, but your connection was more of an adult connection, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I'm connecting. How is this possible? So yours was more of an adult development?
It was, but looking back on the journey now in retrospect, once I understood what was going on, what mediumship was, then having that 20/20 hindsight thing going on, now I can see, oh, well, it was there. It just, I wasn't doing anything about it. I wasn't aware of it.
Oh.
I do remember seeing spirit with my eyes. So that's objective clairvoyance when I was very young with a friend. And I remember going to my dad and telling him about this guy we saw, and he disappeared. And my dad said, it's just a ghost, don't worry. And that was the only conversation I had with my dad about that kind of thing. But I think, I was aware of hearing outside my ears as a teenager. I remember struggling with a lot of anxiety and depression as a teenager and always hearing these voices. I then read the book and saw the movie Sybil. I don't know if you saw it. Sally Field, the woman with 7 personalities.
Oh, okay.
And, reading that book and then, the experience I was having, I then thought, okay, I'm schizophrenic.
Yeah.
And that was a really good reason not to say a word about what I was experiencing. So I kind of kept it to myself and struggled a lot, because in South Africa, where I grew up, you don't go to therapists. It's a different culture over there, certainly when I was growing up. If there's anything wrong with you, you have to see a therapist. It's like people in white coats are going to come and haul you away and you're going to be gone for a very long time. So I was quite scared of that. But looking back now, I can see, okay, it was spirit. It was just out of control. And then as I got into my 20s, then I figured out, oh, my dad's a medium. He does it on the side without telling anybody. So I then found out about that, and he just never, ever discussed it, never did anything, because I was raised in a very strict Catholic household.
Okay.
So there was this thing that I discovered in my early 20s, and I started to speak to my dad about it, but did not want to do it at all. But he spoke to me a lot about life and death, right? What happens when you cross over. So we had a lot of deep spiritual conversations. And I think, honestly, I'm very grateful for that, simply because he died very soon after I discovered this.
Ah,
So it was actually, I had a good understanding of death after talking to him. So I do feel it prepared me a lot for it. But by the same token, I still never mentioned to him what I'd been experiencing earlier. There was never a conversation of, well, you can learn to do this or you should do this. It was never anything like that. And once he died, I just got on with the life of being a lawyer. And it was only many years later that my daughter started with this. My dad had been gone for so long. It was like, oh my God, what is this? Because I never experienced that. I never experienced that with him either.
right.
So that's why it was so alarming. But, you look back now, it's like, oh, okay, it's there. But I think it's with everyone, right? Because I do believe mediumship is perfectly natural.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think most people just aren't aware when spirit's touching in on them. And I think I was one of those people.
Yeah, exactly. Because what I've always come to learn is that everybody has that ability, and they're in the back of their hind brain that's just lying dormant. They've got all the psychic senses, but it's just not tapped in. People aren't using it. They sometimes use the abilities, but they don't even
Yeah.
call it that. Whether it's intuition or whether it's a gut instinct or it's a feeling about somebody, they're using these abilities, but they don't call it that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something, and it is quite natural. And if you look at also perhaps children, all children, they have no barriers. They're never told no. They've got wonderful creative imagination, which invites spirit in, so they're able to have that communication. And they all said, "Oh yeah, I've got this wonderful playmate that nobody else will
Yeah,
see."
right.
Everybody says, "Oh, it's just your imagination." I don't know. I don't think so. I think that's spirit coming to say, we're here. And then eventually that analytical, logical brain kicks in and eventually that closes down. So
That's right.
what was your childhood like? You mentioned, you were in a strict Catholic household. You probably had a strict culture. So what was your childhood like?
I think, my childhood was like anyone else's childhood. I was an only child. So I know I had an imaginary friend. So that was a little bit different. I grew up in the city in South Africa, but my family did own some farms out in the bush. So, where a lot of the game reserves are. So I had a very nice childhood. I had the city experience, but also I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the family's farm where you could be with all the wild animals. And I loved being in nature. So I love that kind of thing. I'm going back this year, and the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to head back into the bush because that's where you can be quiet and disconnect from the world, right?
Yeah.
Which is so important.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Did you have any influence or pushback or saying, no, this is not something that you should be doing, from religion? Was the religious experience that you were undergoing, was that something that was really kind of suppressing you at that point?
At that point in time, I don't think religion was necessarily expressing me because I wasn't exploring this. I wasn't curious about this kind of thing. I think what religion did was, that's the reason it wasn't spoken about in my house, even though my father would have probably been able to help me out just like that.
Yeah.
But no one spoke about it because it was evil. I saw the Exorcist movies and that kind of thing. I did go and visit a circle my dad did once, and I said to him, I'll come. I'd like to see what you do, but I want to wear a rosary around my neck. I need a crucifix and a bottle of holy water. That's how terrified I was of that kind of thing. Sure. And he said, okay, you can come watch. So no, I didn't know. But, even now, when you think about it, a lot of people who come for readings might be Catholic and they're quite unsure, should I come for the reading or go to confession first? Which one should I do?
Yeah.
So I see a lot of that. Mm-hmm. But, as far as general people being open to it, no one in my family is open to this kind of thing. My two kids seem to be little mediums, but they were fortunate enough to be in a home where people could talk about this. It wasn't a secret. But generally, none of my family are actually open to this.
Oh, wow.
Only my two kids, not the family in South Africa or the American family. No one's open to it.
Right. And that sort of seems to be, that question of, I guess you could call it nature versus nurture. A lot of people say, "Oh yeah, well, this person's able to connect with spirit because it's in their DNA."
Hmm.
The more I gather, the more I speak and hear about it, it seems like it's less DNA, more the culture, the nurture, the family, the background. Are you able to speak it, or do you feel that it's normal, so you're able to just open up to it as opposed to have it closed down?
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of closeted mediums out there, right? If you consider the television mediums out there, I think they've done a lot of good as far as mediumship goes, in that it's kind of brought people who might have been in the closet, it's brought them out there. So that's been helpful to a certain extent. However, I work with so many mediums. It seems to be a problem that a lot of us struggle with.
Hmm.
You do this, but no one's open to it. In all my mentoring programs, there's going to be a lot of people there. I don't want people to know what I'm doing. My family don't know what I'm doing. Also, a lot of professional people who do it, they don't want people to know what they're doing because they might be doctors or lawyers or stockbrokers, whatever the case might be, right? So everyone keeps quiet about it, but it's there.
Yeah. It certainly is, and it seems the more I'm looking around, it just seems like it's accelerating. Is that your sense that spirits working with more and more people, more and more individuals around the globe to try to raise the vibration and try to get more and more people open?
When I first started doing this, I remember my school, my center was, I think, the only one. Maybe there were two. I think just one, really, that I knew of. It was very rare. And I remember the crowd would start to attend them. I would describe more as the woo-woo people. A lot of witches, nothing wrong with that, but I would say woo-woos, the general idea that people get when you speak about spiritual people, the cliches. But I noticed within around 3 years of starting to teach that the people were changing, and they were changing quite rapidly, because suddenly it seemed to be really people from all walks of life. That really surprised me. And I would say in the last 5 to 6 years, I'm seeing so many people that you wouldn't expect to take mediumship, well, I know they would, but they weren't really doing it. So this is where you've got professionals in the field of science, the medical field, financial fields, taking all of these classes, so it's definitely something's happening. They're stepping outside the closet. Some of them are being quite open about it. I've noticed there's a lot of therapists, for example, who take Reiki healing. They study different forms of spiritual healing, and they're starting to be, this stuff works. We've got to work with both. We've got to come out and start doing this. So there's still this little clash, right?
Yep.
Between the rules, state rules, governing body rules. But I see there's a strong surge of people wanting to break the mold now and start to really unify their Western medical practice or psychological practice with spiritual.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, where I've spoken to a lot of people who, in some fashion, are counselors or therapists or working in some way, and they've come and wanted to explore the concept of integrating their standard practice that they have a license for with all these other modalities to see what blends with them, what works for them, and what they feel comfortable with, and blend the two together. Like this really seems to work. It's helping. Whatever's going to help me. That's the thing. I say, whatever's going to help my patient.
There
That's
you
what I'm
go.
going to do.
Yeah. How do you get someone's mind in the game? Whatever works, right?
Exactly. It's like what's the saying? I've used this before. It's how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb's got to really want to change. I love that saying, but it's so true. It's so true. So you cover a lot of different modalities. You've got evidential mediumship. You've got trance. You're one of the people who introduced me to trance, perhaps I think within the first year of my working with you. And I was like, trance. A, what is trance? And B, I can't do that. Why me? And then you launched into this spiel of it's going to open up all these other doors. And, over time, it not only it did, but it's, I've come leaps and bounds, but you were so steadfast and just do it, do it, do it. So talk about trance, your experience in trance, how you feel it's important with, mediumship and all the other modalities.
I got into all of these modalities. Once more, my first teacher, Audrey Willie, was instrumental in my training. So she had her own place in Melbourne, and she did a lot of this stuff. So I became kind of immersed in the stuff, and it was a great opportunity for me to experience lots of things and pick up a lot of things. But trance mediumship is the most wonderful vehicle for mediumship. Because trance mediumship, there's a lot of people who kind of think trance is, spirit's going to come in and take your body. It's not that. It's about a blending of the mind where you allow them to speak through you and allow their spiritual philosophy or teaching to come through you. But I've found it's one of the best vehicles to actually enhance an evidentiary mediumship's practice and their ability to connect to the spirit world. I think trance helps people to even, in a regular evidentiary reading, to almost go into a spontaneous trance state where they can speak in the first person. Obviously, to develop trance, you've got to meditate. So that helps us in our own life, becoming mindful, being able to get to that deep meditation. Sitting in a trance circle, the philosophy of the spirit world is mind-blowing. You learn so much, right?
Absolutely.
I sit for trance on Tuesday nights. It's my favorite night of the week. But also, developing trance mediumship is also to do direct communication when you do readings, right? Where you don't need to offer a lot of evidence, but just bring through Dad, and Dad's going to speak to his son, or his daughter directly. That's incredibly powerful.
Oh, yeah.
So, I love trance, and it's a really great technique to develop, but also working with spirit, the philosophy and everything, they inspire you in your everyday life. We were talking about writing books earlier, like let spirit write a book for you.
Oh, yeah.
And definitely if you know how to connect and do that kind of thing, they can probably dictate the book for you.
Weren't you the one who said something along the lines of, after I showed you the manuscript for my book, you said half this book was probably automatically written or something by spirit?
Probably. I honestly believe that.
It was only like 5 or 6 months. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. But you're like, no, that was spirit. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, well, that was probably me being a smart ass. So he couldn't possibly do this by himself. He must have had help from spirit.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. I would have been laboring here for years. The book never.
I didn't realize you could write really well at the time.
But not that fast. Not that fast. I think one of the other things about trance is that it helps us to allow. We get so used to allowing and trusting and surrendering to spirit, which not only helps the evidential aspect, but it helps us open up to everything else and all the other modalities. It's just because that seems to be the fundamental aspect.
Yeah.
Trusting, allowing, surrendering. That's the core aspect of
exactly.
Trance.
Yeah.
That was one thing, because I do remember in the beginning thinking, oh, this is all me. I think you said something, do you notice that your words are starting to change? I'm like, I guess so. I don't. You tell me. It was wonderful. So I thank you for introducing me to trance.
Awesome. Love it.
Because I never would have started there, because I thought they were like two completely different worlds, but obviously they're the same thing. But you also do spirit rescue, which I find so interesting. Help people understand what spirit rescue is. What do you do? How does it work? All that.
Yeah, once more, going back to my first teacher, Audrey, when I say she opened me up to mediumship, she blasted my world open entirely. And I remember during that first course as well, there was a girl there who was speaking to her about having a friend attached to her and that her friend had committed suicide. And I had no idea what they were talking about. It's like, what do you mean? Dead person attached to you? Had no idea what was going on. And she eventually decided to show everyone how this gets done. Had the girl sitting and had me at the back, and she did this process where it was such a shocking weekend, really, because while she was doing the crossing over, I felt spirit stepping to my body, and it was really a crazy experience. But I was also, so this spirit crossed over, who'd committed suicide, through my body. I could see and feel everything. It was amazing, but, I learned so much that first weekend. And due to that, I did start to develop that work in a healing capacity. There's a lot of people who have problems in their homes, and some people also do have issues where there might be a spirit attached in the auric field. Now, I guess, you've got to think of it, if you're looking at it from the spiritualist church's perspective, well, that's a lot of nonsense.
Right.
But from a different perspective that's not within the auspices of religion, it's simply uncrossed spirits are people who for some reason didn't cross over. They just stopped moving. They became confused. So they kind of need a reminder to move it along, so it all depends from which perspective you're looking at rescue mediumship. I feel it can be a very powerful part of the work, particularly for healing, simply because with these energies, if they are in the auric field, because they haven't crossed over to the higher vibration, they still retain the mindset and the emotional state of what they did, what they had when they were still in the physical. So if that spirit might be stuck and they were alcoholics or depressed, they would carry that energy. And that's what happens, when you work with people with healing. What's their vibration? What are the emotions they're holding on to? So there could be a blending there, that their emotions will become exacerbated with a spirit like that closer to them. So that's that field of work. And that field of work can go right up to exorcisms, which I feel should be dealt with, by the church, really. I would say there's a big difference between doing spirit rescue work and mediumship. Rescue work would be part of the healing. So I don't focus on that too much. I've trained a team who know how to do this really well now. And I feel it will only come up, I will only see something like that if I'm doing a healing. Because when you're doing a healing like a Reiki session, when you're doing a healing session, you're looking for what doesn't belong, right? But for the most part, let's say I do discern something within the auric field during a Reiki session, I'm probably not even going to tell the client. Just cross it over. You can just get rid of it, right? There's no point in telling the client because you don't want to invoke fear in people either. Because you say to someone, oh, there's a spirit attached to you, then they go crazy. Oh my God, they move into fear. So you can really move them along. It's like doing an energy clearing. It doesn't need to be a major thing. And this work does not overlap with mediumship, evidentiary mediumship or trance mediumship. Because when you do an evidentiary reading, those that are connected to the sitter that are in the light, right, that's who's going to come through. In trance mediumship, it's our loved ones in the light as well as the guides. So in a reading like that, you should never, ever connect to anything that's a lower level. So the two can remain completely separated. I would say you deal with them for healing purposes. But as far as psychic readings, mediumship readings and trance, you should not be connecting to that at all. Mm-hmm. That's why I feel you don't really need protection, so to say, when you work as a medium, because there's nothing that you need protecting from.
Right. A lot of people have asked me, well, don't we need to do a protection or a prayer or, do this or that? I'm like, well, no, because I only set the intention for high vibration, loving energy.
Yeah. I do say a prayer, before my readings and everything. But for me, although I don't go to church, I kind of like prayer. I'm prayerful. I connect to God. Mm-hmm. So for me, I always like doing that when I do any of my spiritual work. But it's not like, oh, God, please protect me, in case something really bad happens.
Yeah,
it's like,
I guess that's what I meant.
You welcome in that divine light.
Yes,
That's sufficient, but you
Yeah.
don't need to wear a suit of armor when you're doing a
No.
mediumship reading.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant. It's not like not a prayer of protection. Oh, please, just, come by with your terrible swift sword
Yeah.
and protect me. No, you don't need that.
Yeah, but also I've had to evolve over the years,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Because when I first started out, I didn't have I understand all of it now, I understand how mediumship works. But coming up through it, I didn't know that. And I used to actually be very terrified and very paranoid about it. You've got to work on yourself as well, your mindset, and gain an understanding, really understand what you're doing, raise your vibration. Then you realize, all those years I was so worried. It's almost laughable now. But I think, if you don't know, that's what happens.
Yeah, I can remember in the early years, I was absolutely terrified, thinking, all these Hollywood ghost stories were floating in the back of my head. I was so indoctrinated with these movies. I was like, oh wow, I was waiting for all the meanies to start coming in and attacking me. Like, where are you?
Well, I remember back in the day jingling from all the crystals I would wear, all the necklaces, the bracelets, all this stuff. If I didn't have that stuff on, something awful was going to happen to me.
Oh yeah, you got to have all your props.
I don't need it anymore. Yeah, it's so nice to release all of that stuff.
If you need it, okay, but you don't really need it. But it's up here. It's got it as opposed to in here. So. How about spiritual healing? That is so powerful whether it's through Reiki or direct spiritual healing, inviting guides, healing guides through. How do you work with that? That can be so powerful. There's so many cases where I've just been absolutely shocked at what's happened. What's your experience?
I do lots of different kinds of energy healing. I mean, Reiki is an energy healing modality, but basically we're all doing energy healing. And I think, spiritualists seem to feel that the trance healing is slightly different. I don't know so much because I feel you can work. I don't really separate the two so much and maybe it's because I do trance that I welcome spirit in anyway when I work. I believe I've seen some miraculous things happen when it comes to healing. But when you talk about energy healing, all your emotional, mental trauma lands within the aura. And the correlation to emotions and disease, when it hits the physical body and you don't fix your stuff, that's disease. We need to look at the Chinese medicine chart. That gives you a lot of insight. If you've got a sick organ of your body, what's the emotion that gets held there? So that's what needs to be healed. I feel that we are very powerful. The light, the frequency, that the hertz that we can put through our hands is very powerful. But we also need to discern between two terms when we think of healers. When people book a session with you, do they want a cure or do they want healing? Right? That's a very different thing, because I think a lot of people, when they approach healers, no matter what's going on, it might be for emotional healing, it might be for something physical. If people don't really understand this kind of thing, they think, okay, I'm going to go to this healer because I'm going to be cured, whether it be an emotional issue or a physical issue. If they're struggling with their life emotionally and mentally, they think if they go to an energy healer, it's going to be a cure, but it's not. It's a healing. So there's a big difference. Now, you might get a cure sometimes when you do a healing session, particularly when you're working with the guides and the spirit doctors. But I don't feel it's us. It's another higher being working through us, right?
Right.
So I look more upon that as miraculous or divine intervention when it comes to healing. But a lot of the reasons why we actually struggle to get people healed or in that place where they can turn things around is because they think everything's a cure, but they think that they don't need to do anything. They don't need to show up for themselves. They don't need to take action in their lives. So when you go for healing, we will work on the auric field. We can pick up stuff. We can give you spiritual guidance, give you the tools that you need to turn things around. And we can keep your energy field clear. And if you follow the guidance and the advice, change the way you live, then you will be able to hold the integrity of the energy healing we've done at that point in time. If not, you just go back to your old patterns. Everything just resets back to what it was before you came in. So that's an important distinction we need to make. And clients need to understand that, because, if your life's a mess and you're broke, just because you're going for an energy healing session, that starts you on the journey, right?
Right.
You need to show up for yourself, but it's not going to be a cure and tomorrow you're going to win the lottery. So there's a lot of misunderstanding with that kind of thing. It's a way of life. Energy healing, spiritual healing becomes a way of life, the journey of your experience here on earth. We guide.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it sounds like we're also helping the client to understand that much of what they're experiencing is a result of thought patterns, lifestyle patterns. It's almost an education of here's how you can help yourself going forward.
Mm-hmm. That's the beauty of spirituality. When you go on your spiritual journey, if you contrast that with religion, a formal religion, with a formal religion, you look to the rules of the founding principles of your particular church or religion to see how you should act, what you need to think or believe. But you will then go to that guideline or your pastor. Whereas with spirituality, we know we are powerful beyond measure. We are entitled, it's our divine right to reach our full potential and experience joy in all areas of our life. That's when you've reached your life purpose. Whatever the joy point is for you, if you can achieve it, then you're living your life purpose. But we have to go on that journey, and all the answers are within us, so we are required to show up for ourselves and understand how it works. That's the beauty of it. Once you understand how things work, how energy works, how the law of attraction comes into play, your ability to manifest, that's all awesome stuff. That's the great thing with the spiritual path. We can all turn things around. I do believe unless there is a chemical imbalance with someone, we should be able to get through all our emotional, mental issues by ourselves through a spiritual approach. We don't really need to be kind of tied in with a healer all the time. I think if you learn, an energy healer can help you clear your auric field and give you guidance. But they can also, in healing sessions, and I do that, teach clients how to do it for themselves. You've got to teach, empower. Do a clearing, teach, and empower people to go on their own journey.
It's like
that's the ideal world, right?
That's
when
right.
They do that. But
Exactly.
What we run into, unfortunately, is this resistance.
Right.
People don't do it. They don't follow through. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact maybe they're not ready to heal. There's resistance. But also I think there is this misunderstanding about what it is we do. And I feel a lot of people feel when they book with a healer, I'm going for the cure. And that's not the case.
Right.
You're going for the healing.
You're right. It seems like it's almost an education in self-realization, self-actualization, to get to that joy point, to learn that, as you said, it's our divine right to attain that state of joy. And as you do that, it is up to you to get to that point. And if you don't allow yourself to do that, then you're missing out on the full state of life.
Yep, there you go.
And that seems to be what comes through in messages all the time.
Yeah.
Spirit's always bringing that up all the time. At the end of every reading, it's like, find your purpose, or live your joy, or live your fullest life. So
yeah, exactly.
If you were to pick out your most impactful reading that you've had, or your most powerful, or your most wonderful reading with somebody, what would you say it was?
I actually can't even think of one. I can't think of one specific reading that stands out to me. But I can take the impact of a lot of readings that I've done, which has had an impact on me and allowed me to change the way I do things in life as well. And I think the one trend that I do see from Spirit is that they have so much regret. And I think the biggest lesson that I've learned from the readings I've received, but more in particular, the lessons I've taken from the readings that I've given, is to encourage people to be present and in the moment, to not put off things because tomorrow is another day. If you have the ability to have an experience, go and have the experience, because tomorrow might be too late. So I feel it's taught me, and hopefully people that I've worked with, to be present as they go through life, to allow themselves to have the experiences, to always express yourself to those you love. If you've had an argument with someone, don't hold on to it. Let it go. Apologize or just move on from it, but don't stew. We hold on to our anger. We don't do things because we're so worried about, well, maybe if I save more money, then next year I can do that. Putting off life. I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned. And also, I think the big lesson from Spirit is really to live. It's to live your life. And that's because you don't want to go over with regret. Right. But I feel this lesson also extends to mediums as well, right? That you have to live your life and experience life. That is the most important aspect of mediumship development. Because the spirit world can only communicate with us based on what's present here in our mind within our field of experience. Mm-hmm. So if you don't allow yourself to experience things in life, there's very little information that they can then draw on, right, when they do a reading. So I feel it's even important for mediums as well to be present as they go through life, have experiences and live life to their fullest.
Absolutely.
So that's like, for me, a general trend, the most important lesson I've taken from doing my work with Spirit. And it's the one lesson that I do my best to integrate now. Because if I look at my past, I would put off a lot of things. No, but I got to work. Maybe I don't want to take time off now. Take the time. Make the time. Don't worry, if you can afford to do something now, do it. Don't worry about, well, maybe I need to save a bit more money. If you get invited somewhere to have an experience, go. Right. If you can afford it, go, but don't put off living. So many people do that. I'm doing my best not to do that.
Yeah, that is so key. It sounds like the book, The Power of Now by, who is it, Eckhart Tolle, I think. An amazing book. It's all about being in the now, living the joy in the now. And, to your point, every time Spirit's giving their messages, their energy, their love to the recipient, as a conduit, I'm always receiving, it's like a double message. It's like they're saying one thing at the same time. I'm recognizing, wait a second, that was also for me.
There you go. That's right.
As well as the healing. I mean, I'm like getting this residual healing every time they heal their loved one. I'm like, wow, I feel phenomenal.
As mediums, we always think, I used to think anyway, that you need to live a very pure life, right? That you don't drink, you don't do this, you don't do that. But actually, it's the opposite. It's like Spirit wants us to live, to enjoy, to experience. Right. So learning to be more present as you go through life, I feel, is the most important thing. And the most subtle difference that I brought into my life was, let's say, traveling, for example. I would have the camera out, pictures, hundreds of photos, and no one wants to see, and you don't want to look at afterwards. But you kind of live your life from the lens of the camera, right? You don't experience. And once this started to really make sense to me, how one needs to be present as a medium to experience this stuff, I put my camera down. So I don't really take too many pictures, even when I travel now. I'd rather be there and immerse myself and be in the experience, right? Yeah. That's what Spirit's taught me. And I feel, is a big message they want to share with their loved ones as well.
Mm-hmm. What I've also noticed is, to your point on experience, I feel like they're always going through my memory bank of experiences, like it's a Rolodex, and going, okay, what experience can we use to, oh, there's one. And they pull it out of the file and they plug it into the player. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that experience. Yeah. Or that memory. It's like they probably didn't, connect with me until I was much older, because I didn't have all those experiences. And once my Rolodex was full, they're like, okay, now we can use them.
That's right. Yeah. But, you might say that, when you were younger, you didn't have all this stuff. But I think society, people are going backwards now. because everyone's so attached to social media, no one is present anymore. No one is going through life in a present way. All you do is you're like a zombie with your social media.
Right.
No one's experiencing life anymore. So even though we've had so many advancements, I think we're actually moving backwards. Just if you look at from a business perspective, people don't read anything anymore. They are not present. They're not engaged. So
yeah,
it's really interesting. Spirit might not have been able to develop us when we were younger because we didn't have the experiences. And now older, we've got more experiences. But you've got to keep having experiences as a medium. Because if you're just going to go onto social media, what you're not doing is you're experiencing. You become a zombie again.
right.
And then there's actually nothing for them to tap out, from your memory banks.
Right. So just got to
So
keep
it's all
on
about living.
life.
That's what it's live, experience things, be aware.
Well,
Yeah.
you know what I'm going to do right after this? I'm going to go to a bar. I'm going to party. Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
I'm really going to live life. Woohoo, watch out, Spirit. Here we go.
Well, you might have a drink that Spirit used to drink right in your next reading. And
There
then
we
you'll
go.
know why.
There we go. Now it's going to, then there's going to be that one spirit goes, hey, wait a second. I like that. I like that drink. I'm going to attach to that person because he's always drinking that drink. Then I'm going to need you to, give me as a spirit rescue. And so, well, that's a whole nother story. You've had these, beautiful communications. In the beginning, were you having that back and forth with yourself saying, well, is this me? Is this spirit? When in the early days of your journey, were you thinking this, how can this be real? This sounds too much like me. It's coming from me. Because so many people in their early days, are like, oh, that's just not possible. That's too good to be true.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you start off doing this, you don't trust, you think it's all you, but we understand that's your analytical part of your mind. You might remember I talk about the Frankie mind. I've given that name, that voice a name.
Yeah.
So everyone struggles with that. It's very rare for someone not to struggle with that. And I think, part of your mediumship development is to get that voice to quieten down, right? Mm-hmm. That's about being present. But it lasted for many years with me because I also believe I didn't really understand mediumship properly until quite some time after I developed. And from time to time, that voice interferes with me still. I feel it does with a lot of mediums.
Yep.
With all of us, from time to time, it comes up.
Yep.
But you've got to be able to identify it and be aware of it. The more healing you do on yourself, the less that voice is going to interject.
Right. Also,
because mediumship triggers all of that in mediums. That's one of the reasons why mediums need to heal, is because they get triggered. And they're being triggered because of the stuff that they're still holding on to. So mediums are really pushed to go on a healing journey. The more stuff you heal from yourself as a medium, the less you'll be in your left mind, and the more confidence you'll develop as a medium.
Interesting. Yeah, that's so true. I forgot about the Frankie mind. And and that suddenly makes me remember is when Spirit's connecting with you, you'll know it because it is so different than your regular mind. It's coming in such a different way, such different personality, characteristics, sound, feeling than what you're normally used to. So if it's different than what you're used to, you're on the right track.
I don't even know if I can differentiate it as a different kind of voice. It's the thinking. That's what's got to quieten down. But the thing is, the more you develop mediumship's a process of progressive refinement, right? The more you develop, the less you feel.
Yep.
So my mediumship, several years now, got to the point where I don't feel anything. I have no sense of spirit anymore when I do a reading, anything like that. Got to move on to pure trust.
Right.
See, hardly a thing. Everything changes with the gifts. A lot of mediums experience that at one point. So there's literally no voice I'm listening to or noticing. It's just disengage from that mind and move into a place of trust. Mm-hmm. That's the spirit linking for me. But because I've cleared away a lot of the stuff and done the healing, I don't have this critique of that voice present anymore, which is kind of what interferes in readings. So the more healing you do, the less of that's going to interfere.
Right.
because that's really what it is. Your inner critic, right? But it gets triggered because you feel vulnerable when you're a medium, because people are judging you. People are telling you you're a fake. So anything that triggers that, stuff you need to get rid of through healing. The more you get rid of that.
Or you're judging it yourself. You're like, did I get that right? Am I right? I've got to be right.
That's all ego. That's the ego mind.
Yeah.
That's all that is. Yeah. So the more you heal, the better your mediumship becomes.
Exactly. And also I find the more that you meditate, the more you sit in the power, the more that Frankie mind that you're talking about, that just goes away, because all of a sudden it quiets everything and you're able to connect that much easier. That's why that sitting in the power is so powerful. That was how my awakening happened. It was literally 12 months of doing that without even realizing that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's where it all opened up. Well, if you were to mention one, what would you say would be the most important recommendation that you would have for a listener of any background, who's listening to the show today? I mean, it sounds like you were touching on it, like living your joy. What would you say?
The big question that hangs over all our heads is, what is our life purpose? People mistake life purpose for what do I need to be doing in life. It really doesn't matter what you're doing. You can reach the peak of your inner joy and find your life purpose if you're able to experience joy in different areas of your life, like your career, your relationships, your friendships, your family relationships. But you can't compare your journey or what brings you joy to anyone else, because for one person, the joy they need is going to be financially based and a few other things. But for others, it's not really going to be the financial. It's going to be something else that's going to bring them the joy, maybe enough to survive, that they're comfortable, but maybe to allow themselves to travel or allow themselves to be more in nature or live in nature as opposed to the city. So I feel the spiritual journey and what I've learned up until now, that I'm still trying to fully develop for myself, right, is to find that joy, what brings me, Lee, joy, and to be able to get myself to that place where I can feel that I'm 100% living my life purpose. But the thing is, we incline to compare ourselves to others, and that once more is the ego mind, right?
Right.
If you can find that, and no matter how grand or no matter how humble it is, what's going to bring you the joy, you just got to find your joy. It doesn't need to be grand and grandiose. It can be humble.
Is that the purpose of the Joy Guide, do you think?
The Joy Guide? I don't think so. I always think of the Joy Guide as being the guide with a wacky name on table tipping, really. I don't know that the Joy Guide does anything else in my life. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, because it's like I always wondered, okay, what is the Joy Guide here, just to help me to have fun? But is there a grander purpose of a Joy Guide, like, to find your ultimate joy in life?
Yeah, I don't know.
So,
I've kind of changed the way I work with guides a lot. As well. I believe at this point in time, I don't even worry about differentiating between the various guides.
Yeah.
I just call on the team.
Yep.
It's the team. That's it.
And they'll step up as needed.
Yeah, they do. I'll
They
get
do.
the job done.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, I mean, do you have any plans for the future? Anything in the works? Things that are coming up soon?
At the moment, no. I'm just continuing with the work I do. My work's changed somewhat since COVID, in that I'm doing a lot of the online mentoring programs, longer programs, which I absolutely love. The mentoring programs allow me to work with students in a way that I never thought possible, and I love that. That's totally my passion. That's what I need to be doing. And I just enjoy being here in my location. I don't really feel that I want to go out there and travel too much or put myself out there too much to big crowds of people. I feel I'm in this process now where I'm working more with students on that way. And I like the local work over here at my center. And I think, you go through various phases in your development where you say, I need to be this medium who's traveling all over the world. I don't feel the need to do that anymore. I'm happy working with my students, with my clients, from here online, and that's what brings me joy.
No, there you go. You're finding your joy. You're
Yeah,
following
do a
your
bit of
passion.
traveling. I travel regularly, so I like getting out of the office, having experiences. So I would say I'm perfectly at peace, you know.
There you
I'm
go.
doing okay. I'm doing well.
That sounds absolutely awesome. Well, great. Well, Lee, thank you so much. How can people get in contact with you or learn more about you? Where can they reach you?
They can reach me on my website, VanZylSpiritual.com. If you want to take a look at the classes, MontclairPsychicSchool.com.
There you go. And we'll have the links to all that in the show notes. So, Lee, thank you so much for joining us today. This is absolutely wonderful having you on and sharing everything about spirit and learning about the joy. This is wonderful.
Great to see you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Lee, and thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Spirits Beside Us. I'm so glad that you were able to listen. So if you are interested in any of the information, you'll have all the information in the show notes, and you can go to the website at spiritsbesideus.com. And again, if you are interested in the show, you like it, just rate and subscribe. Love to have it. Always helps that way other people are hearing more about what we're doing. So until next time, this is Chris Lippincott sending you love and light, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spirits Beside Us. Make sure you head over to the show notes for all the links and information on this week's episode. You can check it out at spiritsbesideus.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, head over to rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're looking for a community of spiritual seekers like yourself, make sure you join my Facebook page, Spirits Beside Us Podcast on Facebook. This is Chris signing off, sending you love and light. I can't wait to connect with you again on Wednesday.